Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our big movie podcast. I'm Anson Chan.
I'm Paul Morgan.
And today we're reviewing Popstar's Never Stop, Never Stopping and 5 centimeters per second.
Which should we start with?
Why don't we start with Popstars?
All right. So, Popstar is the second Lonely Island movie, written and directed by Akiva Schaffer and Jorma Taccone, who are members of Lonely Island, and also written by Andy Samberg, produced by Judd Apatow, also starring Akiva and Jorma, ironically, Sarah Silverman, Tim Meadows, Maya Rudolph, Joan Cusack, Imogen Poots, like a veritable laundry list of just really awesome people, not to mention so many famous pop artists and rappers and stuff like that. So it's basically about a pop star named Connor For Real, the release of his second album, the downfall he has after he tries a little bit too hard to promote that, and then his rise and eventual kind of successes again. Movie came out in 2016. I think I mentioned it in our yearly wrap-up as being one of my faves from that year.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so it was definitely a highlight of the theater-going experience for me this last year.
I can see why. It was really good.
Yeah, it was one of the few movies where, I don't know, when I go to see a movie, I typically, if I go to see movies by myself mostly, and I don't typically laugh at comedies, even though I can acknowledge when they're funny if I'm by myself. And this one, I laughed my ass off the whole time, even though I was by myself, which was a great feeling because that does not normally happen. So
Nice. I would have to agree. Every joke for like at least the first 45 minutes, and this is only like an hour-long movie or so.
Yeah, like an hour 20, I think.
Yeah. Every single joke landed. It was so funny. Like, it was
Yeah.
just one laugh after another, and it was done really well.
Yeah, very, very tightly edited movie.
Well, before we continue our rambling, Paul, what in this movie really worked for you?
I wrote a lot of stuff down, so I'm just gonna hit the big points for me. Almost every song is hilarious. The song about being really humble was great.
That's great.
Macklemore ripoff was great. The song about she wants me to fuck her like we fucked Bin Laden. That was great, not because it was a good song, but because of the fact that like they keep pushing how many syllables he can fit into a sentence when he's trying to explain the metaphor, which I thought was really funny. The TMZ like ripoff that they have in that movie is so funny with like Eric Andre and Chelsea Peretti, Mike Birbiglia, and Job. I forgot his real name. One scene that really worked for me big time was when they tell the guys to cut off the cameras. And it's the text on the screen, and they're talking about how the bees are coming, and they go in the flamethrower, and tell me you guys got that. And they're like, no, you just told us to turn the fucking cameras off.
Fuck!
Hunter the Hungry, I thought, was a great kind of version of Tyler the Creator, who is known for being kind of a crazy guy and getting people riled up and stuff. And then the last kind of big thing that worked for me was the tests that he made up for his lackeys once he realized he was surrounded by a bunch of yes men. The scene where he feeds them the shit pancakes.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone's like, oh, that's so smart that you did that.
Yeah.
He's like, no, that's not the point. Stop sucking my dick. I was trying to make you guys realize how big of shitheads you are. So those were the main things. I wrote down a couple other things, but I think those are the main things that really kind of stood out for me as working really well for me.
Okay.
What about you? What worked for you big time in this one?
Well, first off, I got to say this was so much better than Hot Rod.
Cool. Good.
To begin with, the parody was on point.
Yeah.
Because Hot Rod was like, we're so aware of our jokes, don't you get it? This is a joke, isn't that funny?
Yeah.
But this like did it in a very straight-faced way. In that mockumentary, everyone is playing it straight thing. And it was also kind of filmed like The Office, where that's also like a fake documentary kind of filming too, where they can kind of get like weird, quick looks at the camera, like what, like like shit like that, and it worked really well for this. Like the funny cutting, a
very distinct sense of style. For the first
like hour, And then like the last 20, that disappears.
It becomes more of a movie in the last 20 for sure.
Yeah.
Except for when they have everyone confusing what camera they're looking into. That was
yeah. Surprise, motherfucker! It's Snoop. You've been surprised. Like, oh my god. Yeah, that was funny. Oh yeah, and to bring it back to the hot rods thing, like this was so nice because it knew when to cut and to cut quick, or it didn't dwell on the joke. It just let it hit. Like it was a quick punch, so it made it that much funnier. Oh man, it was so good. The jokes were hilarious. I like the scene where it was like, "It's a great conundrum. I want to show you my dick, but I can't. It's a great conundrum." It was so funny. Like there are just lines in this, like, oh, so hilarious. It starts out so strong with like cameos from like Ringo and everybody and Simon Cowell. Oh my god,
and like
it's
every
so
rapper
great.
under the sun.
Yeah, the song like in the very beginning, like the karate songs, like they broke out with their karate song.
Oh yeah,
and I have like one line from it, the beginning line, which is, "I like to kick it. I'm a karate guy. Kia."
And then it changes into, "I'm wearing a cowboy hat. Yeehaw."
Yeah. Yeehaw! It was so funny.
Oh my god.
Oh man. The comedy music just was outstanding. Andy Samberg, I know him just from his like music with Saturday Night Live, like Dick in a Box and stuff like that. I'm on a boat. So this is where he really shined. And I think the chef was played by Justin Timberlake, if I'm not mistaken. I didn't look it up, but I think so. Yeah. And that was really funny because I didn't notice until the end after the fish costume thing. Like, that was me in the fish costume. I was like, oh shit, that's Justin Timberlake.
Yep.
Oh man, like this movie just had me smiling. I loved it. I think it was really good.
Yeah. Did you think anything was weak about it? Was there anything you would like to maybe have changed or that didn't really work for you completely?
Yeah, I said before, the last 20 minutes where it tries to become a movie, or at least it forgets that it was a mockumentary.
Yeah. It's a little bit more standardized movie cutting type scenes and stuff like that.
Yeah, the dialogue wasn't punchy, the scene wasn't really funny.
Yeah.
And the jokes went on too long. Like the apology scene and just like everything about like the last 20 minutes.
He's just standing there and he keeps going through the things until he finally arrives at the apology.
I know it was a little tardy, but it was a power move, you know? There was no traffic that day. There was no traffic that day. You know, I slept in on purpose. But
maybe I left a little bit early. Just kidding. Yeah. I didn't show up. Okay, I wasn't there that day at all.
I did like that scene personally. I think that's where it broke down for me.
It was after that when they kind of get together and stuff?
During that, yeah. Because that's like I said, when it starts to become the mockumentary. That's probably just like my taste in comedy.
No, I mean, you make a good point that it does kind of break from the documentary style at that point. It like jumps back into it when they get back to the awards.
At the very end. But it's kind of jarring because like they dropped it cold turkey and then they try to pick it back up again. So that chunk, right? Mm-hmm. Where did that come from? Like, couldn't you have written that better with that going with the documentary? I think
I wonder why they made that decision in particular.
Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't know if that was rushed or something, but like, it was not cohesive to the rest of the entire movie. Sure. And for that reason, instead of being like a perfect comedy, it has that really glaring asterisk, that caveat where it's like, oh no, man, you need to see the whole movie. But it could have really done with some tightening, like, at the very end there. And that's a shame. That's a shame, because it could have been, like, a perfect comedy.
Yep.
Oh, on that note, I know that this movie didn't make money. You and I talked about that in our 2016 end-of-the-year wrap-up podcast.
Yeah.
And this movie was kind of short. I feel like this would have done very well as a Netflix movie.
I know. I feel like they need to make their next... like the Lonely Island's next movie, whatever that may be, it should be a Netflix movie because then they can be creative without depending on selling a bunch of tickets. Because I feel like, I know you didn't like Hot Rod as much, but I like Hot Rod and this. They're two of my favorite comedies of all time, and neither of them made a lot of money. And I kind of want them to be able to be creative without the you have to make a studio a bunch of money caveat.
Yeah, and particularly because this was a mockumentary, I think it would have lended itself very well to Netflix because they already have, like, you know, it's the documentary hub / it could do well for some mockumentary comedy stuff. I think it would have played beautifully. Especially,
you know, because it could be right alongside all those music documentaries that Netflix has a lot of.
Oh, yeah, perfect. Like, this would have just slid right in. It would have been perfect.
Yeah.
So, those two things, the ending portion where everything just kind of like stops being the mockumentary and it being on Netflix are my only two things that I had an issue with.
Sure. Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Oh, also, I forgot to mention, I really liked the performance of, who's that actor? He was the guy in Dewey Cox.
Oh, Tim Meadows?
Yeah, Tim Meadows.
Their manager?
Yeah, their manager.
Yeah.
I liked him in this movie. You don't see him in a lot of things these days.
Yeah, you don't see him as much anymore, but he's still a great actor, and, he's one of my favorite characters in Dewey Cox as well.
I personally hated Dewey Cox, but I remember him...
No way!
Oh, yeah, I hated Dewey Cox.
Oh, dude, fuck you.
Like, I like parts of Dewey Cox, but the movie as a whole, I just didn't like. I love the scene with Tim Meadows, though, where it's like, it's just weed, Dewey. It's not habit forming. You don't want none of this shit, man.
Yeah. Can't you smell it? No, I can't.
But that's a conversation for another day.
Yeah, but, seriously, we're going to have to talk about that sometime.
Yeah, but I love this movie, and those are the only things I could really point out that I didn't like.
Yeah.
Well, what didn't work for you, Paul? Was there anything at all?
Yeah, there's a couple things. One of the biggest of which is a plot point. So at the end, they have this lady come up to Andy Samberg, and she says, so-and-so went too long, so could you guys only do one song instead of two? You're going to have to decide right now.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I understand the possibility of that happening in real life. I've been to a million concerts where one band went too long or didn't, they didn't fulfill their amount of time because another band went too long or something like that. At an award show and something that's going to be aired on television, this shit is rehearsed ad nauseum until every aspect of it is on point. I do not think they would do something like that last minute. And I've never been in an administrative position on an award show, but I've worked for TV. I know a lot of friends who work award shows. I've been to award shows, and it just doesn't seem like something that would happen, where they'd be like, obviously I know they needed it as a plot device to get Andy Samberg to make his arc complete, because he has to make the decision to include all of the guys. But I just don't, it didn't seem realistic to me, whereas like, I could see a dumbass Popstar doing 90% of the shit he did, maybe on a lower level without as much ridiculousness, but I could still see it. So that plot point I thought was a little bit weak. I don't know that I have a good idea of how we could change it, but I think they could have had him choose the quote-unquote the band in a dire moment in a better way than that. The only other thing I would say that if I was like a studio exec, one of my notes would be, is that, and it's kind of to counter something you said earlier, even though I think your point was valid, I think some of the characters got a little bit too quick of an in and out of the movie type thing.
For instance, who?
Let me look up his name real quick. Oh, Bill Hader. Okay, so Bill Hader shows up. He's already a hilarious guy because you see the word guitar tech under his name, and then the first thing you see is him just dropping a bunch of guitars all over the place, which is fucking hilarious. And then he talks about the getting flatline thing, and then we pretty much never see him again for the rest of the movie.
That's true.
I kind of like movies where if you introduce a character, there's a lot more opportunity for them to grow. Justin Timberlake is another example of that. We see his opening scene where he talks about the fact that he does the food. You see he has this kind of funny but not out of range voice for Justin Timberlake to be doing. And then we talk about the carrots. We see the little scene where he's peeking on Andy Samberg, eating the carrots or whatever. And then after that, we only see him in two other scenes. One of which is when he's singing the Mona Lisa song and they tell him to shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
And the next of which is the end scene where he's the fish and he goes, "I was the fish." So it's kind of one of those things where it's like, I would have rather seen a lot more of those guys and a lot less of Andy Samberg's character's lackeys. Like the guys who are just with him all the time, kind of supporting him in everything he does. I think
fair.
Those guys even could have added a lackey type behavior to their character in order to cut out some of the characters. Not to say James Buckley is a bad actor, but I don't think we needed his character in there. You could have just made Justin Timberlake or, Bill Hader those type of characters in addition to their other jobs, you know.
I would have to disagree with you on this point because
Okay.
what they were trying to do by setting up the mockumentary thing, those type of people do come in just for like a quick I'm so and so, here's what I do.
Sure.
Or like I'll say one thing about them. Like everyone else, like all the other celebrity cameos in this. They only stayed with a couple of them really long, which was the guy from Roots, Jimmy Fallon's dude. Yeah, who was the guy? Was it Usher? The guy who danced with the Style Boys.
Oh yeah, Usher. Yeah, he comes back in.
Like they stayed with Usher for a while, but people like they just drop out in that thing. So I think that's okay. But I know what you mean because as a movie, you want that, right?
Yeah.
I would have liked to seen Bill Hader too, but for the one scene he was in, it was perfect.
Yeah, that scene was great, and I do love it. But I understand where you're coming from too. You're very true, very right about that.
And I also like the fact that because they didn't include, they didn't include like Bill Hader, the dudes from the last Hot Rod movie. It's not like you have to see all of them again because they're all just so tight homies. They just want to be in each other's movies or going to let each other be in each other's movies for no reason other than to be in the movie. I respect the restraint, and I appreciate it a lot because I think it could have had more potential to take away from the movie, at least as it was constructed now. Because I see what you're saying, where they could have filled in roles, maybe doubled up on a couple, but that would have also cheapened it because it wouldn't have had as much authenticity to the I'm actually a pop star, this is my mockumentary or documentary thing.
True that. Because the focus should be on Andy Samberg. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Also want to just really quickly mention, even though this isn't something that didn't work for me, Jorma Taccone is, in my opinion, one of the best parts of Hot Rod, and he's also one of the best parts of this movie. Just think that guy is awesome.
Which guy is Jorma Taccone?
He's the guy who played the DJ for Connor For Real.
Oh yeah, he was a good actor in this movie.
Yeah. I think he has a weird sort of kind innocence about him that I always love watching on screen, and he's just a great actor, so always cool to see him getting roles. I wish he would get a few more acting jobs, Yeah, that's the only thing I had to mention other than that. So, do you have any other thoughts that we haven't mentioned? Because I have a couple things I want to just briefly talk about before we go into whether or not we'd, maybe recommend this to someone.
There's a couple scenes I'd like to point out, but I mean, like, I could go on and on for days of the things that I thought were really memorable, like the things that I laughed at. I might bring up maybe two of them just because I thought they were really funny. I really like the scene where he goes to check on his turtle, and then it's like, what's wrong? He's not moving. Why is he all pale? I gotta get him to the hospital. He tries to go out as like the price of fame. I get it. But like, they deflate that moment so well because the scene is supposed to be really tense and really tragic because he can't save his turtle. But the whole premise is absurd and the whole thing is just a giant joke. And like, it's great. He's like, come on, please. My turtle's sick. Like, it was so good. I loved that. Like, I think that might have arguably been one of the funniest not song moments in this movie. Yeah, definitely. And then they even they follow up with the Viking funeral they have where he lights it up with a Roman jumps candle. In the pool. And they start partying and he's just looking all sad.
Oh my god.
It's great. And see that, I think that one might have been my favorite part. And then the scene where he goes to, who's the guy who you just said, the DJ?
Jorma. He plays Owen.
Yes, when they go to Jorma Taccone, a.k.a. Owen's gig, and then Andy Samberg puts on his prosthetics.
Oh, dude, I was going to mention that too. That makeup was so fucking funny.
But it was at this point now where the movie falls apart, or it stops being the mockumentary, because this is when it gets a little bit freestyle, and it turns into just a movie.
Yeah.
So that's where they segue, and it's hard to see the transition because that moment is so funny. But, oh man, that scene was just really funny.
That going out makeup is so fucking funny,
I know,
dude.
It's like, yeah, I gotta forget Sarah Marshall or whatever. I thought it was so funny. Like, oh man, it's great,
dude. Yeah, that scene's amazing.
What else did you want to mention before we go to recommendations?
One of my favorite jokes in this movie that I think is hilarious is 10 seconds is an eternity, Harry. It's a third of the way to Mars.
Yeah.
Tim Meadows is like, I've told you this before, Connor. 30 Seconds to Mars is a band, not a fact. There's one scene with Jorma in it, and he says, like, oh, yo, I found this book in the back of Connor's car called How to Be a Better Friend, and so I think he's really trying. Plus, it shows he knows how to read, which is really heartening. I don't know why that made me laugh so hard. And then the whole metaphor when they're all sitting in Lawrence's barn in the recording studio, and they're all like trying to complete this metaphor, and they're like, the Jizza did a solo album, but he was still in the Wu-Tang Clan. And then they try to do the same metaphor with Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, and they all just misinterpret it. I don't know, that scene was really great. One thing I hate, just in general, and I know from listening to interviews that Judd Apatow hates this too, is I hate pranks where they are legitimately malicious, which is why I loved all the like really fucked up malicious pranks that Hunter the Hungry and Connor for Real participate in, because they were obviously making fun of how just like vicious these like well-paid pop people can be. And so I really like that they were kind of shitting on them for that.
That was another scene I really liked, when he's like, oh yeah, Hunter's like, we're actually getting along great. He's a real prankster. And then the next shot is just like him in a golf cart. It's like throwing a fucking traffic cone at like all the equipment and breaking everything. It was like, I thought that was so funny.
Yeah, and then they're like just really hurting people, and you're just like, yes, I've seen like videos where people are this big of assholes and they think it's like a funny thing. And I did say earlier that I didn't think James Buckley's character, one of the white lackey with the long hair, I did say that I didn't think his character was super necessary to the story, but he had this great line. I think he was talking about Hunter the Hungry. And he goes, man, he's got that sense of humor where it's like, stop, you know? I don't know. That was really great. And then also, going. Just on the subject of pranks, before I close, the scene with Hunter the Hungry where he keeps going, I didn't do it. Or did I? Do it. I did. Not do it.
Yeah.
Did I? I didn't. I did. That whole scene was really funny to me. Just because it took me off guard, even the second time seeing it, how good his pauses were and how kind of they made you think about, you know, whether or not the sentence was over. I don't know. I thought that was great.
Yeah, I agree. That had a lot of room to just be really. It could have faltered. It could have gone flat, but he delivered it. Yeah, it
also could have gone way too long as well.
It was perfect. Yeah.
So kudos to whoever edited this movie, because that. Is not easy to get correctly.
Agreed.
And then, I think the only other thing I wanted to just mention is how fucking many people are in this, which is just awesome. I don't know. Like, people we didn't mention already are people like Jimmy Fallon, Martin Sheen. Martin Sheen is in this movie. That's awesome.
Martin Sheen just has like one scene.
Yeah, and they just socks him in the face. Will Forte plays the bagpipe player, which you don't get to really see that well. Weird Al is in it. Obviously, Michael Bolton's there at the end. Just lots of people. Like Judd Apatow is awesome because he can always get a shit ton of people to be in his movies if he needs to. And in movies like Funny People and this, where it's about the entertainment industry, he makes the entertainment industry more believable by being able to get more people to be in the movie. Yeah, but that's pretty much all I have to say on this one. Is there any other closing remarks you want to make before we talk about recommendation?
Yeah, I'm glad to see Ringo still out there making money. It's nice that they cut him a check, hopefully, to be in this thing.
You gotta think they gave him a nice
I hope so.
Little payday there.
They caught him it caught me off guard. And they had a couple scenes where Ringo's just talking about how great the Style Boys were. It's fantastic. Yep. I love it. Just this movie makes me smile. Thinking about it makes me smile. As for my personal recommendation, I'd say go out and see it. I think anybody can enjoy this movie, so it's 2 thumbs up here.
Yeah, I would just right away say the exact same thing. I think this movie is fantastic. Like we discussed, there was that little tiny break in the pace of it because of the fact that they break from the style a little bit. But I think it's a solid movie, and I laughed my ass off both times. And both times I watched it alone. I don't usually laugh when I'm alone because, laughing's kind of a social thing. So I would definitely recommend it.
Right on.
Yeah.
Now, for our next movie, we have 5 centimeters per second. Before we get into this, Paul, so we don't spoil this for anybody, would you recommend this movie?
Yes, and I don't give a fuck if the person I recommend it to likes it or not. I loved it, and I want people to watch it. I feel like this is the next kind of big director in anime. Not that he's not been working for the last 10 years, but, I think he's going to be very big coming up.
Nice, and I would too. Paul, it should be mentioned that you saw this blind. So,
yeah. No, I didn't know anything about it except the running time.
So, if you guys can, I guess see it blind, because it's, apparently you're in for a treat, and I hope you enjoy.
Yeah.
Anyway, you mind if I try to take this?
Go for it, man.
5 centimeters per second is a 2007 film directed by Makoto Shinkai. It's a Japanese animated film, and it's only about 60 minutes long, I believe.
Yeah, 62 minutes to be exact.
The story takes place before there are like cell phones or internet or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
These kids are growing up and they're childhood friends. They have a really deep connection with each other and kind of a romance, but childhood romance is kind of like, no, you don't know what to do. It's a little awkward. There's a lot of angst, and I don't want to go so far as to say that because it's sounding like a typical anime thing, but it's really not, because it's done with a lot of subtlety, and it's very, very much believable. A lot of other animes tend to go way over the top with this sort of crap and get schlocky. But
sure.
This was done very believably so. The first act ends where they're teenagers and they kind of share a kiss under a cherry tree, but they kind of have this moment where like they know that this is not a permanent moment, but they still feel happiness and sadness at the same time. It's beautiful. The next act opens where our boy main character Takaki Tono is in high school, and a girl has a crush on him. She's kind of listless and directionless, but kind of wants to follow Tono because she loves him or has a crush on him.
And
but
I
she
believe
also
her name is Sumida.
Yeah, Kane Sumida.
Yeah.
While she wants to follow Takaki, she realizes at the end of the second act that they can't be together because he's not really there. He's always thinking of something else, and he's kind of directionless too, albeit he seems like he has direction and knows where he wants to go, which is kind of, I think, what she digged. But what that shows her is they can't really be together.
And also, I mean, not only does it show her that, and not to interrupt your synopsis, but it kind of instills in her the feeling of you might not be able to do everything all at once, but just do what you can. That was one of my favorite lines.
Yeah.
Like, you might not be able to decide something all the time. You might not be able to come to conclusions all the time, but just do what you can.
The third act opens with Takaki and her love interest, Akari, as adults. It's revealed that Akari is getting married, but not to Takaki, who is depressed and just getting out of a relationship. And there's still like that faint glimmer of that love lost, the thing that he kind of looks for. And meanwhile, as I said before, this happens before like internet or phones or anything are really prevalent. By now, there's cell phones. So you're watching the city grow. The scenes change from like, rural Japan to technological Tokyo with cell phones.
Yeah, I think in Act 2 we see that he has a cell phone, but he doesn't use it very much except to occasionally send emails. And then in Act 3 he actually uses his cell phone a little bit more.
I was going to say quote-unquote send emails, because what's revealed in that act is actually he's not sending them.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
He writes them and just deletes them because it's like he wants to send it to her, but he can't bring himself to do it. Anyway, so the third act, now you're seeing the full city developed, it's a different era, it's a different age, and there's a moment where he crosses Akari, crossing the rails, I think probably where they grew up, and he turns around, but then it cuts, right? But at the very end, they go back to it and see what happens when he turns around, and it turns out she's not there, and he just walks away. It's really nice. And then, oh man, the finale song.
Oh, the finale song, I was crying the whole time.
Yeah, this movie just has it rolls on beautifully to that ending, which just caps the whole thing off into this beautiful masterpiece.
Yep.
So, yeah, that's the synopsis. So now that we've kind of wrapped up what happens in the plot, Paul, was there anything that you really liked about this movie?
I didn't even write that many notes, but just the few things I did write that I liked. The animation was so fucking gorgeous. Like, I have not felt
Mm-hmm.
this enthralled by an animated thing since probably Cowboy Bebop.
Mm.
The
That goes for
in
Western movies too, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, just in general, yeah, any animation. There's one shot of a car in the beginning, like first opening scene where I was like, "Oh fuck, this is really serious animation there." And then there's, Takaki's reading a letter in the sunset, and that was just gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
A couple other animated moments. Sun rising in the beginning of story 2 when they're standing at the edge of that thing and Takaki's standing up and other person sitting down. That was just so gorgeous. And they kind of bounce back to that scene a couple of times in
Mm-hmm.
story 2 as well. The design of scenes and moments I thought was really great. They create this sense of listlessness for the
Mm-hmm.
characters in a way that I don't think I've ever seen on film. Like, one of my favorite parts was, and this has little to nothing to do with the story, but just it was a moment that I wrote down that I thought was really special. Was you see this really kind of static shot of like the buttons on a washing machine, but we can
Yeah.
hear the slosh of the water and the whirring of the motor and everything. And just
Mm-hmm.
like there were tons of little things like that where I was just like super impressed. I loved all of the animation so much. Just really, really blew me away. I liked I liked Takaki because he reminded me a lot of me. And I'm not trying to romanticize myself. I don't think he was necessarily a great dude, or like I don't have a lot of sympathy for a lot of his problems, but just a lot of the way he treats the world reminds me of me. So just a little backstory. I not to make this personal because that's kind of unfair, but we just to do a little bit of a reveal. We're recording this on the first or the second Sunday in January 2017. Last night I was at a party for my ex-girlfriend, the one that I feel like the most kind of positively about our relationship in my
Oh my
life.
goodness.
And this is a person who like I've had trouble expressing myself to since we broke up. So we talked a little bit near the end of the night, and I was like, "Listen, I know I drunk texted you when I was in college, and I know I kind of have trouble, being myself around you, and I'm not like the best person when I'm around you, and I apologize. I'm just still trying to like process my personal feelings." And she was like, I would rather just be good friends than have you feel that way. Just don't be a shithead about things. And I was like, okay, great. And I came home just feeling super sad because I had so much I wanted to say about like, man, I'm sorry during our relationship I was such a shithead. I was that way the whole way through high school and I hated myself for it. And I'm sorry that I was just bad about communicating, and there's so many things that I never said because I just would only talk to you when I was really hammered. And I don't know, I woke up this morning with this feeling that like, man, I just spent like a 4 hours within 5 feet of someone, and I didn't tell them about all the things I was sorry for and all the ways I want to be better and stuff like that. And then Takaki and I mean, ironically,
Yeah.
Sumida
The scene under
both
the
have.
tree.
Yeah, what's that?
The scene under the tree.
Well, not only that, but like just when she is about to tell him how she feels when they're walking home and stuff, and she
Oh
starts
yeah.
crying, like I just felt like, God, this movie is like really just hitting me at the exact right time because like both of them have a lot of trouble saying the way they feel, and that doesn't impact their ability to be kind to one another
Mm-hmm.
or to be like normally functioning people for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
But like that's how I felt like waking up was like, yeah, like everyone at the party probably thought I was totally fine and I probably acted completely normal, but inside I wanted to just like sit my ex-girlfriend down and just like talk to her for like 4 hours and be like, here's all the things I'm sorry for. Here's all the progress I've made in my life in terms of personal growth. Here's how I'm going to be a better friend to you. Here's how I'm going to stop wasting your time with voicemails at 3 in the morning and stuff like that. But I didn't say any of that, and I'm never going to, because I think it's one of those things where, you have to just move on. And also, like, in the end of the movie, when Takaki is saying, like, he feels broken, like, I've felt like that for such a long time. And this has nothing to do with that girlfriend. This is just me being me. I felt broken for a long time. I feel like I can't, I don't know, I feel like I can't really express myself to most people. I feel like I've ruined myself in a lot of ways that are irreparable. Like, I don't, you know, I feel like my life, and this is, I don't mean to get so personal, but this movie fucking was very personal, and my life really is off track, and I feel like the only thing I'm going to be able to accomplish with the rest of my life is getting my life back on track, and that's going to be the end. You know, I'm not saying I'm going to kill myself or anything, but like, I have this sinking feeling that's like, once I get my life back on track, that's the best I can do, and then from there I might be able to move on. But I just, like, financially, emotionally, mental health wise, I feel broken. And I really related to Takaki's kind of monologue near the end, where it was like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. Everything is joyless.
Yeah.
Everything is just a haze. I cried, I think, probably starting at the scene where Akaki meets up with, or Takaki meets Akari in the train station. Starting with that scene, I was crying pretty much the whole movie long. It was insane. It really fucking hit me hard, and I thought it was really gorgeous. So that's the things that I thought really worked for me. I mean, the whole movie worked for me. I only wrote down like one thing that I want to critique, but it's not even a critique. So what worked for you in this movie?
Wow, I'm really glad that this had such a profound impact on you. And it's really interesting to hear that, wow, funny fucking time that came, this movie, you know?
I know, it's so funny because I related so much to that protagonist, dude.
How would that party have gone if you would have seen this movie first?
Oh, God, I would not have showed up. I would not have showed up.
Well, maybe that's a good thing, then.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's some weird serendipitous shit, you know?
I know, right? And I was going to watch it yesterday. I just lost track of time, so...
I'm glad you didn't. You had a bad link.
Good thing
anyway.
I watched it today.
Yeah. I'd like to first off say that I wanted to see this movie originally because I know that Studio Ghibli, Hayao Miyazaki is the like creator and just like the main man of that whole studio. He did things like My Neighbor Totoro, Princess Mononoke, Howl's Moving Castle, Spirited Away, The Wind Also Rises, you name it. He's a legend in the Japanese animated world, you know? Since he stepped down, this is their first movie, I believe, without Hayao Miyazaki. And,
not this movie.
Not this particular movie, excuse me. Their first movie, thank you for clarifying that. Their first movie is, without Hayao Miyazaki, is Your Name, which is breaking a bunch of records and everyone's seeing it. And it's directed by this guy, Makoto Shinkai. And I know his other movie I saw was another kind of like short movie called Voices from a Distant Star. Because I looked him up after, and I was like, oh, hey, you know, I like that a lot. I just never thought of looking up more of his stuff. And I read this title, 5 meters per second, and was just enthralled, like, oh, what is this? And I read up about it. It's like, ooh, I think I'll like this. And never really got around to watching it, and I'm just, you know, for the podcast, I decided maybe we should watch it, and I'm like, glad we did.
Dude, yeah.
Yeah, so I think we're going to have to keep an eye on this guy, and whatever else comes out. Like, when Your Name comes out, we got to take a look at that.
Oh, definitely. It bears mentioning also that, much like Cowboy Bebop, which I've mentioned several times in this podcast, one of my favorite series of all time, this short movie is so fucking cinematic.
Oh my god.
In ways that like some of even my favorite animes cannot be. It just seems so careful, so cinematic. There's all these gorgeous landscapes. The shot choice, as much as you can call it that, is just so great. Yeah, I loved it. Even as little of things as when we see, what's her name, Sumida, like, feeling nervous to talk to Takaki at one point. We see her like shaking her leg, and all we see is the leg shaking, and we don't see the rest of her body. And I was like, I love that. Just shot little choice. Stuff like that is so great.
Yeah, because it makes you focus on that little bit of them, you know. Yeah. But it speaks volumes. Although you see mostly asphalt and like road, you just see that leg and you just know it's just like, oh man, I love. I that stood out to me too, and I like animated stuff a lot. And when it's used like this so powerfully and effectively, it really just it makes me so glad, because there are things that you can do in animation that you can't do in normal movies, which is part of the magic, I guess, because you're capturing a slice of life or whatever they can make for you. But in this, every single shot was hand-picked, basically. Handmade. Like, I could give you any scene, any frame, take a still of it, and it's beautiful. You can use it as a wallpaper, right?
Yeah.
Every little thing that they focused on, every little sound choice was very carefully chosen. And it really
sound
shows...
design was amazing, yeah.
Oh my god, it's amazing. And so, that's one of the things I love so much about this one, because they do a couple fast cuts, but it doesn't feel too jarring, or it doesn't feel jarring because it's still putting you in this atmosphere. You're still seeing these things, and yet those shots that were chosen are still really beautiful to look at too, even though they just flash for a second and are gone.
Yeah.
You know?
And I'm very glad also that we watched the subtitled version of this, because some of those lines, if you said them in English, would sound so fucking stupid. Oh my god.
So that's one of the things I want to bring up during the things I didn't like, but that's because I watched both versions. So,
yeah, that's right.
But anyway, back to what I liked. I loved these characters. They feel so real, and you can really empathize and kind of relate with them.
Yeah.
The moment you said at the very end where he's like, I had to quit my job today. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. That's so real. And that has nothing really to do with the relationship that they've been building on, but that's just more slice of life stuff. It's just, oh man, so well chosen, so well done. Like, for him to feel that way or just whatever. Like, you can just so relate to that guy.
Yep.
Now, before I'd seen this movie, I'd heard a phrase, like, I wasn't sure if it was like, if I'm remembering correctly, but I heard it a while ago, because I kind of like Japanese poems and crap like that. I think it's called like beautiful sadness or something, right? Or like back in the day, they didn't really have a word for depression or anything like that, but they could make poetry, and they'd write poetry that was very sad, that like everyone loved because it's so beautiful, right? Because a lot of people can relate to that. But they would call it something like beautiful sadness. So I looked it up, and I think I found something close. It's called mono no oware, which means awareness of impermanence, transient, gentle sadness, beautiful.
They talk about that on Pete Holmes all the time.
Okay. I don't know what that is.
It's a podcast where they talk a little bit about philosophy sometimes.
Okay. But this just captured that beautifully. Like, awareness of impermanence. Oh, hell yeah. Transient, gentle sadness. Oh, fuck yeah.
Yep.
This is so good. I really liked how the first act starts you with the wonder and the young love and the passion, but it's still awkward and clumsy. And
the scenes of Takaki taking the trains.
Oh my god,
that
that's so real.
That was like the most enthralled I've ever been in like an opening scene of a movie.
And I know, because I live in the city, if there's like a fucking weather delay, the delays are gonna stack. Like, we gotta hold up on this station for 10 minutes, we gotta hold up on that station. It's like, you're looking at 2 hours there, buddy.
Yep.
And basically it was like 4 hours or something for him, because I was like, and I know that feeling. It's like, I can't do anything about this, and I didn't plan for the delays, but I also know that feeling of like, I'm letting her down, or I wish she'd just go home because I don't want her to wait for me, and I want to make her feel bad. Oh man. The second act, where they're like that listless, empty, and longing kind of adolescence, was great. And then rolling onto the third act of the sadness that brings happiness, or the pleasure that brings pain.
Yep.
Just beautifully capped off with that song. And I think I have a quote here. Just one line. If the seasons could stand still and we go back to those carefree days and say that I love you, I never could.
Damn.
Like, it's so good. Like, if only for the last song, it's worth just watching this movie.
Yeah.
I have nothing but high praise for this thing. And
yep.
It's such a beautiful movie to watch.
Yeah. I really found that... Oh, go for it.
I also agree that the translation was very good. It needs to be read, I feel.
Yeah.
Because the acting has to be so precise.
Yeah, the acting, I can only imagine just being absolute shit in the dubbed version.
We'll get to that. But what were you saying?
One of the things that I love about this movie is that I related to Takaki in the beginning when he was saying, he was kind of just explaining their relationship, explaining how it made him feel, albeit in a little bit romantic of a way. I related to his want to reach out and then not doing it. I mean, I live far away from a lot of my friends, and a lot of times I don't want to, bother them, but I want to reach out, which manifests itself in me, not getting in touch until 3 a.m. on a Saturday when we're all no doubt drinking and stuff, and that's never as rewarding as just calling them in an afternoon and talking and catching up. And then I also related to Sumida because I know what it's like to be in the same room with someone. I mean, this is not describing last night because I don't know that I have romantic feelings for my ex-girlfriend, but this is just a general feeling. I know what it's like to be in a room with someone and desperately want their approval and desperately want to tell them, man, I think you are so cool, or I think you're so attractive, or whatever it is about anyone else, but just being like, that could ruin like the awesome chemistry we already have,
I totally relate to that.
Yeah, like that's a universal feeling, and she at one point says something like, I'm so stupid I can't even something. And at first I was like, oh man, that sucks that they made this like woman character like self-hateful, because I feel like that's kind of a trope in a lot of Western movies, is like the self-hateful woman. But I really related to that because I was like, I sometimes feel like, I get down on myself just because I won't say something to even like a good friend who I know would, receive what I have to say in a positive way. Yeah, but I related to him. I related to his girlfriend, or I guess his friend. I related to Sumida. I related to all these characters in a different way. And I thought, yeah, I can't think of a movie where I relate to like every single character that deeply. So that's another kind of special thing about this movie. Well, I guess from there, let's talk about, is there anything that didn't 100% work for you? Since we both obviously liked this movie, it resonated with both of us. Was there anything that didn't resonate with you?
There's two things I'll say that I didn't quite care for. One of which being the entire English dub version.
Oh, gosh.
The guy actually wasn't a bad actor, Tokaki's character, but the girls' voice acting were just horrendous.
Really?
It just completely obliterated the subtlety. It was just like, I'm reading this for the first time,
oh, no.
And they recorded it, and I was like, oh god. And so the last scene where like they kind of switched lines of like, and I had that dream where we were all alone under the tree.
Oh god.
And I could see the footsteps in the freshly fallen snow. It was like, oh god.
Oh no.
Like it completely destroys it, right?
Oh no.
And then it goes into the song without any translation, any dubbing or any subbing. Like, so then it just ends with that, and then it doesn't even cap itself off right with the song. It's completely fucked.
Oh,
and that's what the whole movie builds to, is that final song and the montage of the memories.
I can't imagine not hearing that song at the end.
Oh, it was so sad. Knowing what it was, and then seeing what it was chopped into just through poor translation and terrible acting, it was like, oh no. So no. I'm very, very glad that we saw this in Japanese.
And I understand you watched that first, right?
No, I was trying to, but as soon as I was listening to it for a while, I was like, oh, no, I can't do this. Because I knew right away the girl was, like, really shitty. It was like, 5 centimeters per second. What? That's how fast cherry blossoms fall. Don't you want to see the cherry blossoms fall next spring? And I was like, uh-oh. So I knew right away. Oh. But that's where I cut it the first time. Watched it in Japanese, went back to it just because I wanted to rewatch it and kind of relive the movie, and I was just like, at every turn it disappointed. I was like, oh no. But the second thing I would say that I that didn't work for me, the finale song with the montage, the cutting was a little jarring. I
can understand that.
Like, I get what they were trying to go for. with like all the things that they've kind of compiled and made for the movie too. Just like all the different memories that kind of flash through your head that you can't really perceive, but you might, recognize.
Yep.
I love that, but for the sake of, watching it visually, it's very hard to watch because not very hard. It gets hard to watch because you're going from like bright scenes, zoom in close up, dark scenes, a flashback, something that didn't
and you're trying
happen.
to read the lyrics and stuff.
Yeah, so exactly. Yeah, you're trying to read the lyrics. That's pretty jarring, but that's the only other thing I would point out as something. Oh, I also found this kind of hard to watch in a very good way because it was so touching. It's like, I don't know if I want to feel this way right now. So I wanted to pause it a few times because it was just like, oh man, it was, it was so real.
Yeah, no, it was very, very vivid.
Was there anything that didn't work
touching.
for you at all, Paul?
There's nothing that I can think of that didn't work for me. I will echo your sentiment that the ending song / montage thing was a little jarring. But I did want to talk about something that I initially perceived negatively that I think is now a positive.
What would that be?
I don't think it's a positive necessarily, but I also don't think it's negative like I initially perceived it. So, just a little personal background. I don't really like when movies push too hard on the gender roles agenda. I'm not a huge fan of the concept of gender roles, mostly because I'm a guy and I don't have a lot of really masculine traits per se. So there's this one line where after Takaki leaves that whatever that city is that he goes to on the train where it's snowing, essentially where Takaki and Akari meet up at the train station, they hang out and they have this moment and everything. And then Takaki leaves on the train, and then it goes back to voiceover, and he talks about how he says something like, I wanted to protect her.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a part of me that was initially, when I heard that, I was like, oh, fuck you, that, like, typical masculine bullshit, I want to protect my woman kind of thing. But then I thought about it more, and I thought about, Pete Holmes' podcast and what he talks about in that. And though that is like a stereotypically masculine kind of want or need to protect your significant other, I think it's also a very like natural thing is when you love something really dearly, you want to protect it from harm. You want to protect it from the outside world. You want to protect it from criticism, things like that. But the thing is that everyone who's in love wants to protect the person they love, but that's not good for the person you love because people need to experience failure, people need to experience heartache, people need to experience hurt and, everything that's negative in life in order to sort of walk the middle path, as it were.
Ah, the Tao Te Ching, huh?
Yeah, so I read that, heard that, whatever you will, thing about wanting to protect her, and I was initially like, oh, fuck you, go fuck yourself. But then I immediately was like, no, like, that's a natural thing to want if you really care for someone, but I think the fact that he doesn't get back together with her and kind of moves on with his life near the end is kind of like him acknowledging, like, she doesn't need my protection. She needs to just live her life, and that's what's best for her.
I don't even know if they make that a conscious thing on his part.
It's definitely never. It's never overtly said. That's very.
It's just
very
time goes on, and the distance, while at the end has gotten shorter, it's gotten much farther apart in just terms of where they are at life.
Yep.
But I want to go back to what you said about the whole protecting thing. You have to have your failures and stuff. And you bring up Cowboy B-Boy a lot. Do you recall the episode where Jet, the guy with the cybernetic arm, goes back to, I think, Ganymede? Anyway, that like water planet, or the water moon, where his old like lover is. And then he's like, and she's like, you're always like this, Jet. What do you mean? It's like, you're always right. And I can never be me. I can never be wrong. And that's why I left you. Because you always were right. And it wasn't fair. And it was like, oh, man. Exactly what you're talking about. I love that one. It was so beautiful, that episode. I think that one is probably my favorite one. And he throws the pocket watch in the... life spoiler. He throws the pocket watch in the sea, right? when he's because it's kind of like time's moving on, but this watch isn't, and it's kind of holding me back, and he's able to kind of let go, and he throws the watch into the ocean. I did the same thing with my pocket watch that my ex-girlfriend gave me, but I don't think it had the same effect. I don't think it gave me much closure. I think it was just something cool to do, and I was like, oh.
And I love also that, if I recall correctly, in that episode, one of his ex-girlfriends says something about she doesn't remember why she broke up with him because time doesn't stand still.
Well,
but if you throw a watch into the river, its movement stops, and time in the watch does stand still. Which I love the kind of the visual contrast to what she says.
They also, in the beginning of that episode, they call him what's it? You old Rip Van Winkle, you. Like that's a guy.
Do they really?
Yeah, that's a guy whose time stood still for him in the short story. I'm sure you know that.
No.
Yeah, Rip Van Winkle was a guy who like goes into the woods and like he comes out an old man because like time stood still for him for a night, and while he just like for him he was only there for a day or like a night, he comes back and the whole world has changed. He has a beard, everyone he knew is dead, kind of thing. So, like, oh, you old Rip Van Winkle, you! Just great translation.
Oh, good plant then. Wow.
Yeah, but anyway. You know how I said earlier that this movie was hard to watch because I was like, I don't know if I want to feel this right now, because it connects with me also in such a very personal way, where it's still kind of like hard to confront the emotions you feel from the movie because they still kind of dog you in the present, you know?
Yeah.
So I could get personal with this, and I'm tempted to, but it's just, you know, at the same time, it's like for the same reasons why I wanted to pause this movie, I can't really bring myself to. I applaud you on your courage because I wish I could.
Well,
that's
the thing is that like I'm confident that the person I'm talking about, one, would not be offended by what I said, and two, will never ever hear this. So
I think I think for me it's also like a really it's a scary look in the mirror. You know what I mean? Like, when you see that and you feel that and you can realize why you feel it, which is why it makes you uncomfortable and kind of want to like forget about it for a little bit and then come back to it.
Yeah.
Same reason why you kind of don't want to like go into that that or jump down that rabbit hole with what relates with me, because I feel like me confronting that now would just open a can of worms and I'm not even comfortable with it myself, let alone, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I said,
whereas my can of worms is mostly just being uncomfortable with myself, not with what I've done, because, you know, anything I've done to anyone I've moved past, and I'm trying to forgive myself for it and move on and try and be a better person. But like this kind of, most of what I've done in my mind is things that I have not done or not said, and that's what this movie harped on, was the impact that those things can have on you, and that's why I felt, you know, like I needed to say that.
Yeah. I really like the the ending montage when the song is just starting, when they're like looking down, like he looks back at the train and it shows like her like looking back on the escalator, or him like looking up at the Tokyo skyline, or like they're like looking for each other in all these little places while not necessarily being 100% cognizant of it, or the cherry blossom falls in his hand and he smiles, or like, you know, she has the same reaction with the cherry blossom, but it might not be for the same reason, you know. It's like, oh my god, like that is so applicable to like if you've ever like been in like a really like serious or loving relationship. You just kind of like see those permutations or just little hints of what goes on in those from the old days, you know, in your regular life.
Yeah, you
might feel that warmth or that sadness from just seeing something that used to make you happy when you were back in a relationship or something like that. Oh my god, it's so beautiful and smart the way that they present it too, because it's not super duper overt, and that's totally storytelling by just what you see on the screen. Yep. Amazing.
Very, very amazingly done movie.
I'm afraid I derailed you. We were talking about what didn't work.
Well, it was just that thought of like, I was angry at the I wanted to protect her line,
yes,
and then I thought about it more, and I was okay with it.
Yeah.
Other than that, there are just a couple small moments where like they cut something, and they cut something very quickly, and I would have liked them to hold on it. Like I think that The only thing I can think of in that vein at the moment that really comes to mind is Takaki gets on the train to go back to where he came from at the end of Act 1.
Mm-hmm.
And it shows like some birds flying and then like some trees and stuff, but the cuts are literally less than a half a second between cuts. And I just didn't... I would have been okay with them drawing that out a little bit more, I guess is what I'm saying.
I think they were doing...
But I mean, it's not something that didn't work. It's just like that would have been nice to have more.
I think at the time I had a read on that, or at least what I thought was a read, which is they were trying to demonstrate that it was just kind of like a flicker, a moment in time, because the whole time he's talking about like, you know, everything is transient. It's a drop in the bucket, or a drop, like, you know, a drop in the ocean. And
that's very wise.
Yeah, so visually they're not harping on it, because he's actually saying at that moment, like, this is all impermanent, you know. Like,
damn, that's a good read. I like that read a lot.
Yeah, so that's what I got.
So I guess in that sense, I'll take that criticism back, because now that I'm thinking about it, I really like it.
Yeah, so specific to that one part, I think what you're saying, and I think I remember that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there was only, like, the quick cuts were only at the very end, and I think what you mentioned. And maybe the washing machine part, but I think that was, like, in the early days.
Yeah, that was the very beginning. And it held on that for a decent amount, and it wasn't really consequential to the story necessarily, but
I love this.
Just a really well-designed moment.
I love the sounds, bringing it back. Like,
the sound design was so good.
You've never been to Asia, but...
Never, but I'm hoping to be able to travel to both Japan and China soon.
I'd love to go to Japan.
As soon as I'm done learning German, I'm going to go for Japanese pretty hardcore.
You can bone up on your anime.
I feel like this is such a fucking chicken shit thing to say, and I hate that this is such a stereotype, but I have like a genuine fascination with Japanese culture. I mean, I love that they kept Christian missionaries out for longer than nearly any other group. I love the kind of filial piety that's there in both Shintoism and in more of the Chinese traditions like Taoism, Confucianism. I love the religions. I love the culture. I don't know. I would love to go to either Japan or China. Big fan. And I hate when, you know, it's such a stereotype of like, oh, white guy loves Japanese culture. But it's like, I genuinely do. I love reading about it. I mean, I've only just started, but I'm sure I'm going to love Romance of the Three Kingdoms. That's not Japanese, but it's Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
You know, all this stuff. I love all of it.
No, I know. And you kind of have to come to terms with the label you kind of get. I remember I had a car, the Honda Fit, in high school. And
I remember that car.
Yeah.
Bright blue Honda Fit.
A little rice burner is what people would call it. But
did they?
Yeah. But someone in school had a Honda Fit too. I think it was Tess, and I thought she was a dumb bimbo. But she was a nice bimbo, but a dumb bimbo, right? And I was like,
you were like, hey, that's my fucking car.
Yeah, but then I realized, like, just because someone else that you don't like has your car, or, you know, it doesn't make your car any less good, because you can still like it, and it be a good thing, even though, like, other people like it, and they're not as... I don't know, you don't like them.
That's hard to come to terms with. I've felt that way before, where it's like, man, I hate that I like this thing because someone I really don't like also likes it.
Right, and so you kind of have to come to terms with that, especially when you deal with Japanese stuff, that it's a huge fucking, I guess, black mark, because... Oh, yeah, white guy likes Japanese stuff, you know, because of all the weirdos who are out there who are just taking it way too far, maybe.
Yeah, and it's like, I'm totally not one of those weirdos, but I know someone's going to see me and associate me with one of those weirdos.
Exactly, you know? And, like, at the same time, it's like, we can both appreciate the same thing. Nothing against them, right? But, like, it's that connotation. But it doesn't make it any less special.
There's this wonderful story in comedy that I love that, you know, Anthony Jeselnik has a lot of jokes that, if you're stupid, could be construed as sexist or racist. But what he kind of likes to say is, like, whenever I tell those jokes, I worry that, like, a certain number of the audience is laughing because they think this is a sexist or racist joke. But what it is making fun of the people who have sexist or racist views, because I'm not my character that I am on stage.
Yeah, that's the danger of satire.
Yeah, exactly. You risk, angering fucking stupid people.
Or you don't know when it's taken literally because it's done so well. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a pretty fine line.
It is a pretty fine line. It's tough.
Yeah. Well, this movie has inspired a lot of good conversation, I'd say.
Yeah, I would love to maybe revisit this another time soon. Maybe watch it again, see what's going on.
Yeah. We should also maybe, if you want, check out some more of Makoto Shinkai's work.
I totally agree. That guy is awesome. I'm in love already.
And there's also
I've only seen this one.
There's some other ones too. There's another director I really love named Satoshi Kon. And there's a couple movies I haven't seen from him that I'd like to view as well. And he does good work.
Let's make sure we do it. I want to definitely incorporate a lot more tunage into our podcast.
I'm glad because, another reason why I kind of wanted to do this one, because I already knew, from what I read, it was supposed to be really good, highly praised.
Well, that someone on Wikipedia it says some reviewer said that the year it came out, someone said it was the best anime not created by Miyazaki that year, and I was like, "Whoa, that's a tight compliment."
I think that narrows the what anime has to offer in a way.
Sure,
but that's funny.
It was a Japanese reviewer though, so I feel like they probably saw a lot of shit.
But yeah, when you said one of our podcasts, I think it was Kubo and the Magic Guitar, when you were like, I only like to watch animation for animation's sake, and I was like, oh yeah. Well, I'm sure I could dig up something that you might like that might change your mind.
Yeah, this one really fucking destroyed me, man. Oh, my God.
I'm both glad and I'm sorry.
No, dude, it was pimp as hell. I loved it.
It's that mono no aware. It's that sad happiness I'm getting from destroying your life.
Dude, did it in the most beautiful way I can imagine.
Was there anything else that you'd like to say about 5 centimeters per second?
Not that I can think of. We touched on all of my notes. Yeah, I just loved it.
And I think I've said my piece too. Well, I guess that's it for our big movie podcast this week. I'm Anson Chan.
I'm Paul Morgan.
And we will see you guys next time.
And don't forget to learn the metric system before next time.
Exactly.
You should say that. You won't cut it in.
You won't understand this movie if you don't understand the metric system.
There we go. All right, next time.
Later, guys.